Alright, yo, what's going on, all my gamers, all my Wuthering Waves gamers? Chat, I cannot tell you just how excited I am to actually talk about this story. Chat, I'm like Daniel Bryan. Yes, yes, yes. This story has finally started to go in the right direction, chat. After 2.0, it did look like it was going pretty decent. At that point 2.0 was probably the best story that Wuthering Waves had, and it's not like, the other patches were good. The other patches were okay-ish, The best story had at that point been 1.1. The rest of them were kind of okay-ish. This is why I say that Wuthering Waves, you're not really, the story is okay, right? 2.0 kind of put it in a step in the right direction, and then 2.1 took us like 10,000 steps back with how awful the exploration quest was in that story. And now finally 2.2 has got to be not only one of the best stories in Wuthering Waves, but one of the best stories in gachas. This is like a Nikkei level story, chat. Like, this was amazingly written and everything. But first, I want to get through how I normally get through these, and let's start off with the characters. Starting off with Chiconia, aka Catheter, because I couldn't figure out how to say her name. I'm gonna be honest, I think the Chinese names are kind of easier for me to say. I don't know why, but Chiconia, chat. This is possibly one of my favorite new characters. If you don't know anything about me, I am a huge tomboy fan. I am a tomboy enjoyer, a tomboy connoisseur, and it seems like Kuro is trying to get me on their side. You know me, unsigned hype. Everyone's trying to get your boy on a contract, and Kuro Games is definitely stepping in the right direction with all these mommies and all these tomboys, because PGR also, they also released a tomboy. And you know what? I think I'm sold on Kuro Games. I'm not gonna lie, but Chiconia, she's a little quirked up elf tomboy with thick thighs. She's a bard. She just kind of shows up in the beginning and then she leaves. You never really see her again. But I really like her part. She's very quirky and energetic, and it was just such a fun time to have her on screen for those like 10-20 minutes that she was on there. So I really liked her. She mostly was there to tell you that the Phasalia family wants to come and see you. I said, you know what? Say less, I'm there. And that leads us into Cantarella, who is the MILF, big-breasted mommy, pretty much one of my favorite characters in this game. And I'm gonna be honest, I thought she was just gonna be eye candy for the whole story. She's not really gonna have a big story or anything. I thought she was just gonna be there just to sell to the gooners, and it really surprised me just how much she was really, really important to the story, and just how in-depth her character really is. But I'll save that for when I talk about the story. I really wasn't expecting that at all. I love her. She does so much behind the scenes. And I think that's just kind of how the Phasalia family works. They just do things in the shadows. They work in the shadows, especially Cantarella. So I really, really liked her. Next is Cardathea, which took me, I cannot lie to you, I think about 2 hours of hearing her name before I said it right. Now I can finally say it. Cardathea, she is pretty much your wife throughout this game, or this quest. She's kind of like Furion, a small elf girl. I called her Furion the whole time, I'm not gonna lie. She has a very, very tragic story that you kind of learn about as you're going through the gravity part of the story and that upside down area. She's pretty much just like your companion through the story. She helps you out with the puzzles. You have to use her power to get to the point where you actually meet the last character introduced in the story, which is Fleur-de-Lis. Which, spoiler, if you're watching this, you already know about the story. Fleur-de-Lis is basically Cardathea, but a MILF. Despite her being so hot, and man, she is thick. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't have a lot of time to enjoy her thickness, because she comes out and comes at you hard, because she is in the boss fight, and she is one of the most amazing boss fights ever. I can't lie. It felt really sick to fight her. You never really get that feeling of fighting like a real life hero, if that makes sense. And she is kind of like described as this big this hero who was like held back the, what is it, the void? Is it the darkness? I think it was I don't remember what it's called. The black tide. And you get that feeling. It's almost, how do I explain this? And this is something, because I did say that, Renacida is essentially just a Dark Souls game. It pretty much, you feel that it is essentially just, influenced, ripped off from Dark Souls and FromSoft. She's essentially essentially Artorias with a MILF body. And you kind of feel it. Like when you fight Artorias, he's this big looming figure and a badass. Fleur-de-Lis feels pretty much the same way. She kicks your ass immediately. and when you fight her, when you go full rover, when you arrow install as your rover, it feels like you're on par with her. She didn't really, although she was quote unquote pretty easy, she never felt like she was really giving you an inch, and the fight felt amazing. I loved it. Now next, we have to get to the story. I am gonna have to give you pros and cons. I'm gonna have to nitpick, to be completely honest. Otherwise, I'm not really gonna have to say anything. All my negatives about the story are nitpicked. I'm just saying that out front because it is just so good. I had to go look for problems. Does that make sense? Like, this story is in such high quality. I had to just find things I figured people would just not like. Otherwise, I'm not really being fair to other stories because I do the same thing. Now, the thing about this story is I think this story, it flowed very well. I never felt like something was just like, oh, what the hell? Where did this come from? Nothing was never really outfield. You were flowing through the story pretty well. It's only a 3.5 hour story. But with a 3.5 hour story, everything felt contained. Everything was resolved. Nothing was left unanswered, right? Everything was very, very good. Also, so I did want to talk about this because, there are people like Ryuku Sensei and other people who talk about camera work and how Wuthering Waves has really good camera work. I never really cared. I never really thought that was a really important point. I play Honkai Star Rail story, and even if it's just standing there, I don't really care. Until this point, with a very good story, the camera work really, really shines through. It's not like other stories where I'm like, I'm not really caring, I'm not really paying attention. Dude, the camera work, I feel like they stepped it up. This camera work in this game, or in this story, is unmatched. Is actually one of the greatest things I've ever seen. And I'm not talking about in cinematics. I mean, just literally as the characters are talking to each other, it feels so lively and you really get everyone's emotions on their face. I really, really liked it. Now, this story originally, I thought it was just going to be kind of whatever, not really is what it is. I did have high expectations, which were blown out of the water with how good the story was. But this story had a lot more depth to it than I originally thought. With Chiconia coming in, I was like, oh, I guess this is going to be kind of a quirky story, a very funny one. It is what it is. But it got so dark so fast, especially immediately after. Chiconia is probably the happiest part of the story. And then your gathering wives moment. Other than that, everything is pedal to the metal. You get a lot of what's happening, and I really like it. I think the story had so much more depth, and it had a big plot twist at the end. And I was like, dude, this story had me at the edge of my seat the whole time, except for the part where I was bawling and crying. Because the ending with Imperator had to be one of the saddest lines I have ever heard in any game. It legit, when Imperator said the line of, before they left, man, them asking you if they did their job well was such a blow and such a heartbreaking dialogue. I started crying for 5 minutes. It was so devastating. I don't know why. Just something about a deity like that, just wondering if they did all they could, was just so... I'm sorry. It even hits me now just thinking about it, but it was just such a perfect ending to Imperator's story. And it gives a lot of insight. This story gives a lot of insight into Cantarella and the Phasaelias. The Cantarella just being such a huge part of this story, which you never really expect because she is off screen a lot of it, and you kind of see why, because it fits her perfectly how she's been doing a lot of things behind the scenes as well, setting up a lot of what's happening on the screen and setting up a lot of what happens at the end of the story. Katsura plays a huge part, honestly. I think you find out she's supposed to be the maiden, but she gave up that power at the end. It's really good. Now, I need to get into the cons of this. This is gonna be, and I'm telling you, I am nitpicking this. Just don't get mad. This is still, in fact, a Gathering Wives story. The time you spent with Cardathea is essentially just a date. You know, it might not resonate with a lot of people. You know, it definitely adds on to the Gathering Wives. They're not beating the allegations is all I'm saying. And it's also kind of a bit slow to start, I feel like. And when you get to the point where you're going around with Cardathea, trying to open up and get all the swords, that part does get a little repetitive. You know, you're just kind of going around fighting, breaking these shackles, getting the sword. You do that like 3, 4, I think you do it like 6 times. It's actually a lot. So in that, you know, it is repetitive, but you do learn a lot through that story. Like I said, I am nitpicking this just to be fair, because it has to be. Chat, this was such an amazing step up from Curl. I kind of wonder where the hell this has been the entire time, especially after that god-awful last patch. Oh my god, that was an abomination. I don't know. It is the biggest piece of dog shit I've ever seen, but this makes up for it in strides, in ways I can't explain, chat. This was, and I'm not giving this lightly, especially because, you know, it is a genuine 9 to 9.5 out of 10 story. If you play any Wuthering Waves story, I recommend this one. This is the Wuthering Waves story. It is amazing. I love it. I hope you guys loved it. Let me know how you guys feel about it. Become a member, comment, like, subscribe, and I will catch you gamers in the next one. Bye.